You should all have had the little button to press for permissions now. So, hello everyone, and welcome to Surviving the School System, Education and Mental Health. So this call is one in a series of calls about youth mental health. We've had one that's about the failings of the mental health service and one about how corporations and austerity are driving mental illness among young people. Both of those are available to watch on YouTube. If you go to Just Treatment's social media or website, you can find it there. But the focus of this call is going to be on schooling. So last week, children across the country between the ages of 4 to 18 will have gone back to school after the long summer holidays. But for many, it's the start of day after day of dread and misery. For far too many young people, school has become a site of trauma, making every day a nightmare that gets harder and harder as the days and the weeks and the months and the years drag on. I feel particularly connected to this topic. My child started year 1 last week. He's neurodivergent, and despite the teaching staff being absolutely brilliant, I know that they simply don't have the resource to support him in the way that he really needs, and that in truth, there's too many kids in the classroom for him. I really, really, really want him to get on in mainstream school, but I wish the school system was just better set up for his needs. And I know that there are thousands of young people across the country and thousands of parents like me in exactly the same situation. And we're going to hear from some of them tonight. So this week saw the school system's failure of children with special educational needs receive widespread attention because of a Today programme where parents and young people described the harm that the school system was causing them. This included one young person who was left with post-traumatic stress disorder because of her experiences in primary school. For neurodivergent children, these experiences are way too common, with noise, the number of children, rigid expectations about what to do, and lack of adult support, making classrooms an unsafe environment for lots of children. Particularly powerful on the programme was testimony from Black Sen mamas who spoke about how hard it is when children face the double oppression of white supremacy and ableism in schools. The school system has been broken by the same toxic forces that have destroyed a lot of our health service. So a toxic combination of austerity, which is stripping schools of the resources that they need, and also corporations who are only worried about profit being drafted in to fill the holes. Whether it's multi-million-pound exam boards charging schools eye-watering amounts of money and promoting a model of exams that cause unbearable levels of stress, or companies like Serco profiting off behaviour management systems which penalise and exclude our children with a punitive model. Once again, it's poorer children and kids of colour who are most harmed by these behaviour management programmes. So tonight we're joined by a great range of speakers, all going to be talking about their own lived experience of the schooling system. So we've got Elaine, who's next to me, from No More Exclusions. She's going to be talking about institutional racism in schools, which sees kids of colour routinely excluded. We've got Melanie, a leader with Just Treatment and a parent. She'll be talking about her and her daughter's battle to get support for her daughter's mental health. And then we've got 2 leaders from our youth mental health campaign, Grace and Paddy, who are talking about their experiences in school. We're also going to have lots of time for your questions and comments. And so please do put your questions in the chat as you go. We will be collating the questions and we will try to get as many of them as possible at the end. And I know that for some of you on this call, you might be here because you're struggling in school yourself or because your child is struggling. We'd really love to hear your experiences and your questions in the time at the end. But I really wanted to flag now that none of us on this call are experts on the schooling system. We're here to share our own individual perspectives. So we can't answer like super technical questions. We won't have time to get to questions to the end, but please do put them in the chat as we go and we will collate them and get to as many as possible. I also wanted to flag that we want to create a safe space on these calls. If you are concerned about anything that is said here or anything that's put in the comments, please do message Just Treatment's Diarmuid, who's providing facilitation and technical support tonight, and we will address it. So first up, I'm really delighted to hand over to Elaine from No More Exclusions. There we go.
Thank you, evening everyone, and thank you for having me in this space. I'm Elaine. I'm from No More Exclusions. I'm also neurodiverse. I have ADHD, dyslexia, and dyspraxia, and have struggled quite a tremendous amount navigating through systems, even now as somewhat an adult. So just a bit about No More Exclusions, just to touch on. So No More Exclusions is a Black-led and community-based abolitionist grassroots coalition movement, which was birthed in 2018. Essentially, it was birthed by a group of young people, as in myself and others, with lived experience of school exclusions, teachers, ex-parents, advocates, teaching assistants, social workers, and other professionals who simply had enough of the harm the educational system was causing the Black, brown, and global majority of young people. Within No More Exclusions, we have 5 working strands. So we have youth voice and development, law and policy, parent and carer voice and partnerships, and educating care and curriculum. So each of our members will be committed to a strand who committed to focus on racial justice and abolishing essentially school exclusions. Together, we'll be committed on capacity also to look at and focus on racial justice and abolishing school exclusions. Over the year, as a community, we've worked collaboratively with different community groups who work in solidarity to protect the Black child from harm. As change makers, we've spoken on different panels, workshops, and contributed to research. And we've also created the guide, What About the Other 29? Essentially, What About the Other 29 is basically speaking about the one child or the children that have been excluded, and that big idea of the question of what about all the other children. I think to amplify a call out for the change in a toxic system that has created so much harm within the educational system. Enemy is an abolitionist movement that is not looking to reform the system or to make school exclusions less harmful or disproportionate, is actually to just completely end it all. Because we're aware of the different effects that school exclusions can cause throughout the young child's life in regards to lack of opportunities in the future, the school to prison pipeline, poverty and homelessness, substance abuse, and mental health issues. Being someone with lived experience of school exclusion and also had a battle and still some battling with their mental health, I can vividly remember when my anxiety started. I couldn't place it or call it or name it as anxiety. It was just the little things about worried being seen on public transport, as I was permanently excluded at the age of 14. So it would be things like walking past my secondary school and seeing other young people or my peers that I used to go to school with, and just that initial shame. At such a young age, I couldn't name it as being paranoid or being labelled or thinking, oh, okay, this is how people are going to view me and this is what's creating me anxiety, or I'm having these panic attacks, with not being able to source it as what it actually was. I was diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 14, and it sounds quite bizarre because I'll say I'm one of the lucky ones because I understand the CAMHS weight in this and how hard it is to actually get diagnosis in this day and age, and previously as well. But yeah, once I was given that diagnosis at the age of 14, I remember very shortly after I was permanently excluded, so I had no support. In terms of support, there was no ECHP plan, but when I do look back, I don't think at that point the ECHP plan was around at that point, but there was still no external support that I generally needed. I really struggled in school, and once I left school, my behaviour became worse. I created unhealthy coping mechanisms. My mental health really did deteriorate. I did manage to attend university and now have a bachelor's degree. But in terms of that, I realized that once I requested support for my ADHD, I then had a late diagnosis at the age of 23 with dyslexia and dyspraxia. I kind of think about it now and laugh, despite it not being actually funny. How could that not be picked up from? Because I'm actually, when I read back my work or the words that I miss or text messages that I send friends, I kind of still somewhat correct myself, and it's like, okay, you're dyslexic and it's fine, but in society and how we look at the educational system, it's not looked at as fine sometimes. It often pushes me back to think, what if these things were picked up? Would my behaviour have been as erratic as essentially I've been told, or would I have maybe initially been able to be nurtured in a classroom space, be understood what the difficulties were, whether it's been in my household with learning or what I found difficult? Could that be picked up on, and would I be a different person? Obviously, I can't essentially go back in time. So I feel like the work that I do today is very much hard work and in essentially somewhat healing. And I think working for organisations like Enemy and also being a youth worker now, it kind of is healing work and trying to support the young people that are currently going through these traumatic experiences right now. It honestly saddens me because despite not being able to change what I've gone through, I can see that the NHS currently has, especially with CAMS, the whole idea of the waiting list where young people are just trying to understand who their self are. And the long waiting list, services being underfunded, is really causing destitute to young people. I feel like we hear a lot of these buzzwords about holistic care, trauma-informed practice, early intervention, and a lot of this is the idea of creating this, for me, illusion that things are getting better. But it's almost like, how are we putting into practice these movements, and how are these organisations actually doing what they're saying? Because right now, what I see is that there's lack of services for young people to attend. They're young people that, even if they don't have, maybe they may not be neurodiverse, or they may not have a mental health condition now, but the fact that they're reaching out for help and support where maybe 10 years ago that might have been a taboo, and they're still not being able to access these services, is really, really difficult to see, especially when they're trying to seek help and trying to understand self. I generally feel like we really need to start taking place and listening to the young people that are currently going through traumatic experiences, trying to access services, and instead of giving back the monies to giving back the monies in terms of early intervention is really important. As with young people now, currently they're calling out for help and support. So instead of privatizing and giving all these organizations support when it's too late, early intervention is really key.
Thanks so much, Elaine. That was so powerful. It's really, really shocking to hear like everything you went through and the lack of support, but like amazing to see everything you've done now. And also No More Exclusions model of change, which is just totally incredible. So yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. I really appreciate it. We're going to go over to Melanie now. I worked with Melanie for almost quite a while now at Just Treatment. She's been a brilliant leader with Just Treatment, but she's here tonight to talk about, her struggles with her daughter. So over to you, Melanie.
Hi, I'm Melanie. As Emma said, I just wanted to talk a little bit tonight about my daughter Morgan, who's now 13, and our sort of desperate path. It's like you said, Elaine. You can laugh at it now, but it certainly isn't funny while you're going through it. Basically, in 2017, my daughter was changing. She started acting out in school, and she was like hurting other children. Basically, I don't really know any other way to say it. And school's point of view was that she was naughty, or we got a lot of judgment about how she was raised and things like that. But obviously, as parents, my husband and I knew that there had to be something wrong, that she wasn't just, having trouble with other children because it was fun or because she was evil or anything like that. So the first things that happened were we got referrals to neurodevelopment, and also to CAMS. The neurodevelopment accepted the referral, and I don't know how much you want me to talk about that piece of it. I was going to focus more just on the mental health. So neurodevelopment, that's the group that does the assessments for autism and other neurodiverse conditions. They accepted it, and CAMS denied the referral due to a lack of severity. I honestly don't think they use those exact words. That was the situation, is that they felt like there was a lower level of services that would be able to accommodate us. They gave us a referral to a Christian counseling charity and asked us to get in touch with them. When I first got in touch with them, I told them right away that we weren't a Christian family, and they're gonna have a problem with that. And this is not, I'm not making any commentary right now on religion. I'm just talking about barriers and exclusions and walls and things like that. So I was upfront right from the beginning. And what the person said to me is, wow, that's unfortunate that we weren't Christian. So obviously I didn't go any further in that. We ended up, because you can't give up when, I'm sorry, I do cry a lot. But when you're at home and your child's at school hurting people, it's kind of every minute, I was anxious all the time, and especially knowing that he didn't understand it. And, she didn't know why she was doing these things, and that I was basically her lifeline to getting help. It was on me. So I started seeking some kind of like private situation for us. But honestly, I feel like CAMS would have been able to do the job of deciding what was appropriate for my daughter, not just providing services, but she's at an age, she's 7, and she's too young for like talking therapy. And play therapy almost seemed too young for her. So we didn't have any guidance in that. And honestly, when you talk to a lot of private companies, they're thinking about money, unfortunately. So anyway, I did end up getting her into a play therapy environment. I'm not really sure if that helped or not. I think the thing that helped more were the explorations on the neurodevelopment side. So this was 2017. Now in 2021, 4 years later, she was starting high school. The day before she started, we got her diagnosis letter that she's on the spectrum. As she started high school, things got really dark for her. She went from a school of 100 children in all of reception to year 6, 100, to a secondary school where just her year was 240 kids. All the kids that she came in with sort of saw her as this child that hurts other people. So she did not come into the situation with any friends at all. She's different. She'll tell you that she's different. So she got bullied a lot for being different. She had a really hard time, honestly. That first year was very, very dark. So one evening I found her self-harming. Sorry, it's really hard. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to sleep. I just wanted to be there and just hold her 24/7. I called 999, not because she'd hurt herself severely. It really wasn't. She dragged a pin across her hand and it made like a scrap. But I knew I needed someone. I needed someone on my side at that moment to sort of gauge my own reaction and the intensity, and to kind of just give me some general advice. 999 actually gave me more help than anyone in this entire situation. I mean, they couldn't actually do anything for me, but they sent me so much information about supporting her. Self-harm, suicide, depression. It was really unbelievable. There was a lot of practical things. It was a bit overwhelming because it was all going to be in my hands. If there was anything gonna come out of this information, it was in my hands. We went to the GP and we were again referred to CAMS. and we were denied again. This time they said it was because she was already under neurodevelopment for her autism. This was like just such a massive blow, because at this point we knew we were pretty much finished with trying to get help from CAMS. Their reasoning for both were absolutely ridiculous, but it didn't seem like anything that we could fight. And now that we're over kind of the very difficult part, I do have fight in me. And I feel like I want people not only to know about this, and I'm not complaining. I really just want people to know what the situations that our young people can get into. Um, and I'm hoping that things can change. That's basically why I'm here.
Thank you so much, Melanie. Thank you so much for sharing that and being so brave to talk about everything that you and Morgan have been through. It's
Thank you.
utterly heartbreaking and shocking to it's just, yeah, and such an indictment of the system and the system failing so many young people who are in you and Morgan's situation. It's just completely.
Oh, sorry. To be honest, like the thing that helped us, like I don't want to say in the end because she's only 13, but the thing that actually brought us on to the other side was efforts made in school, to be honest, and her finding her crowd, her making friends and finding people that were like her. That's what has changed everything for her. But as much as we knew that, you can't force. How do you force that? Like, oh, go find other autistic kids, or go find. Thankfully, she's very proud of being autistic, and she's very outspoken. And she told she still does, every person she meets, I'm autistic. And I think that kind of is what led her to finding this group of friends, which to this day brings her joy every day in school, no matter what she's facing.
She sounds amazing. She sounds amazing.
It is. It really is.
You too, as a mother, fighting for her. Well done.
Thanks.
Okay. Next, we're going to go to Paddy. So Paddy's a leader with Just Treatment on our youth mental health campaign. Paddy is past school age now, but he's going to be talking about his experiences at school and mental illness. Over to Paddy.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Paddy. I'm a mental health campaigner. I've got OCD and anxiety, so that had a big effect on all of my kind of school life. But a particular part that I want to focus on is exams and exam culture. So I did my exams this time last year, my A-level exams, and I found them incredibly tough, and they were really, really detrimental to my mental health. So I started struggling with the anxiety around exams. Well, pretty much for the whole of sixth form, I struggled with just kind of the fear of the failure and feeling like it would be the end of the world if I didn't do very well in them. And it kind of, at the start of sixth form, I would be really anxious, and whenever I wasn't revising or wasn't doing anything to help me in school, I'd be worrying about it. And then that kind of built up and built up, and then by the time I hit exams, I got so worked up, and I kind of had a bit of a breakdown the night before one of my exams, and I just burst into floods of tears unprovoked, which was really not what I needed the night before an exam, especially with A levels when you only have 3 exams per subject. But this was a culmination of the couple of years and the pressure I felt, and the pressure I felt from the system and from the school. Because all throughout school, like we were told to, focus on mental health and um and make sure we're mentally well, but it was always with the caveat of at least but do revision, but make sure you look after your mental health, which is quite contradictory. And so yeah, after that I managed to get through all the exams, but after my first couple of exams, I started struggling really badly with stress dreams. So I was waking up most nights, stressing about the past exams, dreaming about them. They were nightmares really. And that's kind of continued even a year on. Dreams of I still get dreams of like waking up. I wake up with a cold sweat of the fear of having to do the exams again, which really shouldn't be the case. And I think it kind of signifies a broader issue with the system. I don't think the system of examinations at the end of a course is fair. I think um, meritocracy is a myth in our system. Exam results, if you look at the statistics, marginalized communities and people who struggle with their mental health um, do less well in exams, and that's a fact. I think one of the reasons around the mental health is a lot of people who struggle with their mental health take large periods of time off, and exams really don't compensate for that. There's no way to put an asterisk on a exam result and say, oh, but they achieved this grade having only been at school for half the year. But everybody's judged in the same way. Like it's like judging how good an animal is um, by telling them to climb up a tree. Well, a monkey's going to be much better than that than a fish, but doesn't mean the fish hasn't got its own skill set and hasn't got its own abilities. So I really do think that the exam system needs reforming, and um, what I'd like to see is a move towards exams within the course rather than at the end, because you just never know what's going to happen at the end of a on any day. As I said, I struggle with OCD, and the OCD just attacks what I care most about, and obviously I cared a lot about the exams, so I really started to struggle with obsessive thoughts during the exams and the nights before when I was trying to revise. Which this would have been helped had there been exams at the end of modules rather than exams at the end of the course, because the exams would have had less pressure on them. So I don't think I would have had as much stress, and that would have meant the OCD was less severe. But yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about.
Thanks so much, Paddy. Again, another incredibly powerful testimony. And thank you so much for sharing your experience. Yeah, I really think exams are like one of the most extreme signs of a school system which is so rigid and does not cater for, you know, the variety of experiences and backgrounds and personalities that kids are bringing into school, and just really is just designed to sort of fit within a box, and if you don't fit within that system and that box, then tough basically. And yeah, just to comment as well that exam boards are multi-million-pound businesses that, you know, are charging schools increasingly large amounts of money that they are really struggling to afford, and really just pushing this model of examination, which puts such extreme pressure on young people. And thanks so much for sharing that, Paddy. It was really important to hear that. Yeah, and now we're going to end, last but definitely not least, with Grace. Grace is another Just Treatment leader on our youth mental health campaign. So yeah, over to Grace.
Hi everyone, I'm Grace. I'm going to speak a little bit about my experience with mental illness throughout my school journey. Just want to say thank you to everyone for being here and for listening to all of us talk. I think it's really important. But I'm going to start a little bit about how my mental illness affected me. So I first started noticing that I was having trouble with my mental health when I was in year 7. So when I started secondary school, I would have been 11 years old. And my anxiety was quite bad. I had mostly social anxiety at the time, but it started to get increasingly worse. And it was a struggle to deal with. I obviously, being in school, you're surrounded by so many people, you know, it's a new school, you've got to meet lots of new people, trying to make friends. And I really struggled with anxiety, and it was something that I suffered with in silence, and nobody picked up on it at school. But I don't blame anyone, because I was suffering in silence and I didn't come forward and speak about my anxiety at that time. But my anxiety did quickly lead to me developing anorexia nervosa. I got diagnosed at the age of 13. Um, and that was a very difficult period of time. I obviously lost a huge amount of weight, which was not recognized at school. I mean, it was very obvious. My mum was the first person who took me to the GP to get diagnosed. And no one at school had even acknowledged, had come up to me, had, you know, questioned what was going on. Why was I losing so much weight so fast? I was very, very young. I was 12, 13 at this time. So that wasn't recognized. And I had anorexia nervosa, but I also developed this alongside obsessive compulsive disorder, which started in the form of obsessional thoughts about my appearance and fears about my appearance and what I might look like. And then compulsive behaviors, mostly compulsive exercising, and also a preoccupation with numbers. So that's quite a common symptom of OCD. So I would exercise in different numbers, like all the time, exercising hours and hours and hours a day, which was of course preventing me from going to school. So that was quite a difficult period of time. And I actually had to, the most severe time, part of that was, I was actually during summer holidays, so I wasn't at school, but I was admitted to hospital at that time. And then I was still in hospital when school began again for the next year. So I couldn't go to school for a while. I think I was out of school for a couple of months, until I was able to go back to school. Obviously, they pushed for me to get back to school as soon as possible. And once I was at school, honestly, the school had absolutely no clue what to do with me, really. I think there were so many teachers there that tried their best. There were so many people who wanted to help, but honestly, I don't think they had the training. They didn't have the facilities. There was no mental health nurse in my school. There was nobody who understood eating disorders or mental illness. No one could actually help me. And obviously, the transition back to school was very challenging, because I was still going through a lot of treatment and I was still very underweight. So that was quite difficult. And then once I had returned to school, I ended up being the victim of cyberbullying. So I didn't realize that a photo of myself, where I, was extremely underweight, had been posted on Facebook by my sister at the time. I didn't realize that she had posted this photo. And people in my year had found that photo and had sent it across the school, and were commenting lots of different things about my appearance, and just a lot of negative things. And these were the main people that were talking about this, and was sharing this photo, were the people that were my friends before I'd left. So I was extremely stuck. I didn't really know what to do. I remember breaking down in tears at school, and I think this was my second day back when I'd found out. So I broke down in tears, and my sister was at school at the time, and she found me in the corridor, and took me to one of the teachers who knew the most about my situation, and they helped. They helped comfort me at the time, but obviously there wasn't really anything they could do. The school obviously found out about what had happened. I didn't want there to be I didn't want anyone to get in trouble. I didn't want anything like that, but the school did nothing to interfere. They didn't do any they didn't do any chats about cyberbullying. They didn't do any chats about mental health and how to treat people who are suffering with mental illness. They didn't intervene at all to help not just me, but anyone who after me might have gone through the same thing. Obviously, it pains me to think of someone else having to go through the same experience, but the school did nothing to prevent that or to help me in my situation. So it was quite a difficult experience. I was then stuck with being in the same year group as all of the people that had said all these things about me, and had seen this photo of me. And I was just left to try and carry on in that school, which actually led me at one point moving schools. But my anxiety at this point was so severe that when I did move schools, it didn't go very well. I couldn't really speak to people. I couldn't really make friends. I was so socially anxious. I was worried, obviously, having been judged in the past. I was worried about being judged again. So my move to another school didn't help. And that school didn't do anything to try and keep me there. They didn't put anything in place to try and help me fit in, or just help me, get used to the school system and everything. So I ended up going back to my old school because that was what I felt, that was what was familiar. I went back to my old school, and I was still at this point suffering with extreme anxiety and depression. And in the end, I decided to stop going to school because every time I went to school, I would have to be surrounded by the people that had said some pretty nasty things about me. And I also felt very uncomfortable eating in front of people, even though I no longer suffered from my eating disorder. I had recovered at this point. I felt that there was always eyes on me when I was eating, and I always felt judged. So I didn't really eat lunch at school. I waited until I got home, and that's when I would start binge eating. So that's when I started suffering with binge eating disorder. So I ended up just deciding I don't want to go to school anymore. And I was probably 15 at the time. So, I just made my own decisions, and there wasn't really much that people could do about it. My mum obviously did her best to try and get me to school. The school were like, Grace, we need you to come in. Like, you can't be at home. But in the end, I refused, and there was nothing they could do about it. So pretty much I just stayed at home and laid in bed every single day for, I don't know how long. It must have been like 9 months, something like that. I would stay at home. I wouldn't go out. I wouldn't socialize because I didn't have friends because I wasn't at school. I wouldn't socialize. I would literally just stay in bed all day. I wouldn't do any learning. So I missed out on all that education. The school didn't send me any work that I could do from home. There was nothing put in place to help me. And this was a problem because this was coming up to my GCSEs. So when I was in year 11, obviously I had to take my GCSEs, and I hadn't been at school for a very long time. And obviously this was very worrying for myself, my family, everyone, because, I hadn't learned any of the curriculum. And I was one teacher from all my subjects who sent me a pack of all the information that I needed. And that's what they did. So there was one teacher that sent me a pack, and I got to not revise, but learn all of the information that I needed for the exams. And I did that. And then I had to do all the rest of the learning by just videos online. I did as much as I could, much research as I could, because I knew I needed to pass my exams. So I did all that from home. Luckily, I managed to pass my exams. The school did let me come in and take my exams in a separate room. So that was one thing they did do to support me, so I didn't have to be in the hall. But yeah, I stayed in a separate room, did my exams, and yeah, all went well. But then it came to deciding what to do for A levels, and obviously I hadn't been at school for like 9 months before this. I really didn't like school. There was nothing put in place at all from my school or from any school that I had been to or visited that could help me with my mental illness. So, like suffering from OCD, it's extremely complicated. Obviously having a history with an eating disorder, there was nothing that anyone had put in place to help me, and I realized that, you know, being at school just wasn't right for me. So I decided to do my A levels online. I went through the National Extension College, and I did my A levels online. So that was 2 years of, again, being isolated at home. I was too scared, obviously, to go to school from having, you know, the experience I'd had. So I did my A levels online for the next 2 years, managed to do well, managed to pass them. But yeah, that was sort of my school experience. I think the two things I would mention the most is that I think there needs to be some teacher training, mental health training, because there was absolutely nobody in my school who knew anything about mental health, mental illnesses, and how to deal with students. And I don't want that to be something that other kids have to go through, where if they're suffering, there's nobody there that they can talk to or who can support them. So that's one thing I would say. And also just a little thing about bullying. Bullying, it does happen at school. You know, it's something that we really want to try and stop, but it's obviously, it's very hard to do so. But I think educating not just the teachers, but educating the children at school, the students, about mental illness and how it affects young people could be one way to help prevent that type of bullying, like what I went through. Because obviously these kids, they were very young, as I was, didn't understand, you know, eating disorders, didn't understand what was going on, and so they just used it as an opportunity to make jokes or just, you know, make themselves feel bigger. You know, there was absolutely no education on mental illness, and there was no interference when there was bullying happening at my school. So yeah, those are the 2 points that I think I would mention from my whole story. But yeah, I hope that that was a good retelling of my story.
Brilliant. Thank you, Grace. Again, like so powerful, and just, I mean, absolutely shocking to hear everything you went through, and, you know, hats off to you for getting through all of that, and just such an indictment of the school system. Yeah, it's just been such powerful speakers tonight, and you've all spoken about really quite distinct and different experiences, but I guess the commonality is a school system that just doesn't have the resource and is not fit for purpose. And then when cross-sectioned with ableism, racism, oppression, it's just, yeah, the trauma and the harm that it is causing young people is completely shocking. So now we do have some time for some questions. So carry on putting your questions in the chat, and we will try to get to as many as we possibly can. So we've had a couple of questions, a few questions so far. So first of all, from Tom. So Tom said, it's great to be talking about this, but does using a mental health frame risk over-medicalizing children if psychiatric diagnoses and treatments are the tools to and are psychiatric diagnoses and treatments the tools to address these injustices? So that is, does a mental health frame risk over-medicalizing children, and are psychiatric diagnosis and treatments really the tools to be addressing these injustices? I'll maybe read all of them out, and then people can choose which ones they'd like to answer. And then from Jay, again, Jay says, thanks for sharing. This is an indictment of education and mental health systems, and it needs a totally new system. So the question from that is, what should this new system look like? And then finally, question for Grace here, looking back, would changing schools have been a useful option for you? Yeah, so those 3 questions to start off with, and then maybe we'll have time to come to a couple more if people want to put any more in the chat. So over-medicalization, what should a new system look like? And looking back, for Grace, would changing schools have been a useful option for you? And something else I might add in as well as a kind of another addition to Tom's question is, how should we be organising now around these injustices?
I think I can go off the
Excellent.
how should we
Kick us off.
be organising in terms of the injustices. So I think, unfortunately, in this day and age, a lot of the work has to come from us. And I think it's more about amplifying our voices and holding spaces like this where we are able to meet people and communicate and share experiences, but also making the government and the systems aware that we've actually had enough. I really appreciate listening to Grace's story, Melanie and Paddy's. A lot of the things that you were saying may not have directly resonated with me, but there was also things that directly resonated with me in terms of how the system has treated us and also failed us. I think in regards to like No More Exclusion, a lot of it is about advocating and knowing your rights, essentially, which is difficult as a parent, as a young person, to navigate through systems that are basically there to create harm. It is hard to navigate through them, but once you know somewhat your rights and how you can kind of fight the system instead of upholding it, I think it doesn't get easier, but that you're also aware of how to maneuver in certain situations. So for instance, with a young person in school now, there are a lot of things that schools are doing to young people, like off-rolling exclusions. That's essentially illegal. All children should be in school, essentially. Children do have the right for education and do have the right to be in school and to have education. So for instance, a new system that if a parent is to take their child on holiday, they will get an essential fine, right? But if that child is excluded for untold amount of time and not being put into a new school, that's okay. That's contradictory of what the system's trying to put in place. So it's about challenging essentially how the educational system is seen within us, and also coming to spaces like with No More Exclusions, trying to look for people to somewhat advocate for you, or just enabling or being in space like this to be educated, I think is really important. And also for young people, I think I was saying previously about when I was in school, in terms of anxiety, paranoia, depression, I couldn't label it as that because I actually didn't know what was going on with myself. I think it's amazing now that young people have the tools in regards to maybe social media, that they can see certain things and they can see their self or different values that someone else is also struggling with certain situations in their life, that there is a similarity. That doesn't necessarily mean that you may be diagnosed with BPD or you may be diagnosed with depression, but just the idea that you can resonate with someone, I think it's an amazing, beautiful thing. But with that, it's like, what are we going to do to the early intervention for a young person to come and say, well, I am feeling like this today, or I am really upset that this has happened today, or this has happened in school. There needs to be spaces where we're able to hold how a young person's feeling moving forward, so it doesn't impact in their lives. Because for instance, with I think what we were saying previously about anxiety and social anxiety, I find myself now in my adult life that these traits still follow me, which for me personally, again, like I can't go back, but I always do think if it was tackled at an earlier stage of what this actually looks like, or how can I hold this space, or how can I hold these feelings, it may not transpire as much as now in my adult life where I'm always second guessing things, or I'm always feeling anxious about things, or I'm overly worried about certain situations that I don't need to be worried about because they're very minuscule. So yeah, I think a lot of it is, again, finding spaces that we can all collectively and collaboratively work together, and also knowing our rights and trying to work within communities or within ourselves to organise together and essentially amplify our voices.
Thanks, Elaine. It's really great, and that's why the work that No More Exclusion doing is so powerful. I don't know if anyone wants to come in on any of the other questions.
Shall I answer the question that was directed at me?
Yeah, thanks, Grace.
Yeah, so would changing schools have been useful? Yeah, I did actually try that. So I did change schools at one point. because I was obviously very anxious being around the people that were involved in, the bullying. So I did change schools, but having suffering with extreme anxiety, changing schools was just another thing that I had to deal with. It didn't help me. In fact, I also, having to change to a school that was local, meant that there were some people at this new school that I went to that knew about my past anyway. So they had some, they had a little bit of knowledge about what had gone on, and so it was a bit uncomfortable being around those people as well. So yeah, changing schools was an idea that I had and I hoped would go really well, but it didn't really work for me because my anxiety was too severe at the time. And the school that I went to, they didn't do anything to support me, not only just because of having anxiety, but being a new student at a new school is scary anyway, and the school that I went to, they didn't really support me being a new student, so yeah, it didn't really go as well as I'd hoped it would. Yeah.
Thanks, Grace. One more question that's come in from Cameron. Would a system that focused more on experience gained through volunteering or jobs, etc., as well as personal traits, mitigate the mental health impacts of exams? Yeah, if anyone wants to come in on any of those final questions.
I'm happy to talk about that one.
Thanks,
I think, yeah, 100% agree. I think the curriculum at the moment is rubbish. In all honesty, like the whole curriculum. I don't know about anybody else, but I've never used my Shakespeare knowledge from GCSE English. School doesn't equip us for leaving education. I started working a full-time job, and the difference, I just wasn't equipped at all, because I think we're so based on the school system is based on you do your A levels, you go to university, and that's just not the right option. I was pushed hard to go to university, and I just said no, I didn't want to do it. But I think kind of more rounded vocational qualifications, like you say, would be a much better option for a lot of people. And if you're enjoying your subjects, if you're enjoying what you do, you're going to be much more likely to work harder at it and to put more effort in. Instead of being forced to do something that you don't want to do, like the idea from Rishi Sunak to do maths until you're 18. I just think a lot of what's taught is more just based on ticking a box rather than actually preparing you for future job roles and as you say, like we could do volunteering and help people grow as a person, help people actually live a life that fulfills them rather than live a life that fulfills what society wants them to do.
Thanks, Paddy. And we're coming near to the end of time now, so I'm just going to ask Melanie, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to chip in on before we wrap up, but no worries if not.
Oh, sorry, everyone did such a good job answering questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Melanie. Okay. Well, I just want to really, really, really thank our 4 speakers tonight. I just feel what we've heard has been incredibly powerful and a real, well, for me, it's just been a real shocking insight into the kind of state of the school system. Many of the forces that are creating this within our school system are creating the same problems that we see in our health system. So, austerity that is really stripping our schools back of the resources that they need, even though we have amazing teachers who want to do a great job, they just can't. And also, the role of corporations and private companies, running academy trusts, exam boards, really trying to profit off our school system. Really creating a system that isn't there to serve children anymore, and in fact it's doing massive amounts of harm. So at Just Treatment, we have a youth mental health campaign where we're organising with young people between 18 to 30 who are directly impacted by the youth mental health crisis, and also talking to parents and carers too, like Melanie. The campaign is looking really at the role of corporations within the mental health crisis. And if you'd like to find out more, you can do so by filling out a story form on our website. And you can find a link for that on our website, which is justtreatment.org. As part of our campaign, we have a petition which is urging the government to increase investment in mental health and reform services. And by signing the petition, you'll be offered the chance to be added to our mailing list. And this means you'll hear about all future calls like this. So we're having a whole series of youth mental health calls. The next one is going to take place in November. And at that one, we're going to take a closer look at some of the corporations and the different sectors that are driving mental illness and the kind of demands that we can be making to curb their power. So you can sign the petition by clicking on the link, which is here on this. You can click on the QR code, which is up on the screen, or putting this very long link in if you prefer, if you can write it down quick enough. But you can also just go back to our website again, justtreatment.org, where again, you can find all the details of the petition and how to sign up to that, and then get details of the calls as well. So yeah, that wraps up everything for tonight. Again, just to thank all of our speakers. It's been really incredible to hear from all of you, like really moving, really powerful. And also everyone who came along, thank you for asking such great questions. I wish we could have had longer for the discussion. And yeah, just to remind you of our next call in November. In a few days' time, this call will be up on Just Treatment's YouTube page. So if there's anyone else who you think might be interested to see it, please do look out for that and share it with them. And yeah, now just to say good night to everyone. Feel free to unmute and say goodbye as you go off. And yeah, wishing you all nice evenings.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.
Yeah, that was great.
Thank you, and thank you for everyone who was speaking.
Amazing.